And now a little story from the apples.
But Marguerite has a really tender relationship with Liam. And my son, Liam, when he was small, he's just about to turn 20. In 2 days, he turns 20. And parents are all going, what? When that happens. But when he was little, she would just come over and take him. And she would take him to the little soccer field at Oxford College of Emory University. There were no lights there. There are no stoplights in this town at all. It's a little college town. And Marguerite enjoyed going to women's soccer there because she had a friend whose granddaughter was on the team. And it's about 100 people watching, so you can actually talk to the players when they go by. You know, kick it in that goal when you get there, sugar. All right, Dr. Marguerite. That's what. And if you watch kids at sporting events, they get bored and they go off and do their own thing. Marguerite and Liam would always go by the Chick-fil-A and would always say, thank you. And the people always say, my pleasure. And then he would sit, where you put your feet in the aluminum stands and eat his chicken where people sit. And that was made a little table. She always made sure he finished his meal. And then he would take his Thomas the Tank Engine trains and he would go and play in the red clay, the little red clay track around the soccer field. It was not a track and field track. It was a jogging trail. And he would play in that dirt with his Thomas the Tank Engines. And he came back one day and he couldn't get the dirt off the tank engine. Magnets, they hitch with magnets. And he showed it to Marguerite. I can't get this off. She goes, oh, there's iron ore in there. That's in the red clay. So those are little specks of iron. When you go to show and tell, show people you trades. And he said, okay. So he showed it at show and tell. He said, this is iron ore on my magnets of the train, and that's because it's in the red clay, and that's one of the reasons the red clay is red. And his kindergarten teacher didn't know that. And she said, Liam, you're a genius. And he said, thank you. And she said, my pleasure. We know where she worked when she was in college. And one day, they had gone a couple of weeks later, they'd gone to a soccer game, and Marguerite was having a good time, and Liam was playing in the dirt, and a couple other kids came over, and he came over, and he was crying. And Marguerite said, what is wrong? And he pointed. Now, he'd been doing this all his life. It's always been just fine to do that. And he was pointing, and there was a fellow, it was a Friday, so it was a fellow in khaki pants, boat shoes, and like a polo shirt with Emory written here. That's business casual for the suits. And Liam said, that man won't let me play in the dirt. And Marguerite looked at the dirt, and it was truly red. It was exceptionally red, not naturally red, clay red, but something else. And Marguerite turned to a teacher, a woman named Dr. Scott, and she said, what's going on here? Dr. Scott taught English. And she said, oh, yeah, what they've done is they're doing some improvements here, and they've cut a new thing, and they've put brick dust where the jogging trail is. The jogging trail had been there 100 years. And when I mean 100 years, when I say 100 years, I mean 100 years. And Marguerite said, improvement makes straight roads, but the crooked roads without improvement are the roads of genius. Dr. Scott said, is that William Blake? Marguerite said, yeah, how old do you think I am? Do you think he thought that up himself? Yeah, and Dr. Scott went on to tell Marguerite that they're going to put a fence around the field and they're going to put up lights. And Marguerite was heartbroken about that. It just didn't seem necessary. It seemed silly. When she gets in these moods, she gets in her 1968 Plymouth Fury. It's the last car my Uncle Charles gave her before he died because he hasn't given her any cars since. And she'll start driving. And she got on the highway that's called 441. Well, 20 years or so ago or so, they widened it. They dynamited the mountains that this road goes through. It's in the North Georgia mountains. I mean, she drove all the way up there. And this is before she had a cigar lighter extension thing for her phone. So her phone died. Cigar lighter is what we call them. They don't have those anymore. You would call it a power port. But it's a weird little pug because of cigar lighters, young people. Anyway, she was driving, and then there were these signs that said Old Historic 441, and it follows the contours of the mountains. And she came to a place called Tallulah Point. that overlooks Tallulah Gorge, which is southern for a canyon. You would look at that and go, that's a canyon? Stay with me. It's about 1,200 feet. And you're going to go, that's not a canyon. We're talking about the east, y'all. Our mountains are older. They're worn down, like old people's teeth. And there was a place that she used to love to go to with my Uncle Charles when they were young. They would actually go and canoe, whitewater canoe, down in the canyon. And then they would have their supper at this place called Tallulah Point. It had a barbecue. It was built by people that didn't really know construction. Somehow it stood on the edge of this cliff. It would never pass inspection now, but it's been there long enough. It was like it was flying, like Snuffy Smith's cabin in the old comic strip. That used to be in newspapers or these little cartoons. Anyway. And it had the little, she couldn't believe when she came to Tallulah Point, it was open. It hadn't been open in years. She was so excited. It had been closed down. And she walked in. There was a real bell over the door that went ding-a-dinga. There was a young woman of about 50, gunmetal gray hair and pigtails, pink overalls, and a tie-dye T-shirt. And she said, "You're open." And the lady said, "I think you're right." Marguerite liked this woman immediately. And she went through the store, and she saw that it still had some old stuff in it. It still smelled like an old wooden store, and there's a smell to that. She went out on the deck where you can overlook the gorge, and there was the dime-operated telescope. And she looked for a dime, and a hand came around and put the dime in the telescope, and it was that woman. And she said, "You're not making any money on this telescope if you do that." She goes, "Well, I didn't lose any either. I have the key to the thing." And Marguerite looked across the gorge, and she looked down at the river, and there were kayakers shooting the rapids. So much easier than the canoe back when she was young. And it lasted for 5 minutes or so, and then it stopped. Well, she knew she had to buy something. And she went, and she found this little toy boat. It was run by a balloon. There was a balloon that went into this little tube that came out the back. It was this beautiful little boat. And she was so thrilled with it. It was $4.99. It was less than a hamburger at McDonald's. And she bought it. And she drove all the way back to my house. Now, I'm on showbiz time, people. She got to my house at about 2:15 in the morning. She saw the light on in my office. And she came in and announced her presence the way she always did. Woo! And so I said, "What are you doing here? What is going on?" She goes, "Where's Liam?" I said, "He's in bed." I didn't tell her he'd only been in bed about 20 minutes. "Go put water in the tub. You don't have to have any hot water." I said, "All right, I do what my elder tells me." And I went and got Liam. I said, "Aunt Marguerite's here." And I carried him. He was asleep. I carried him in, and I put him on the toilet with the lid down. And she filled up the tub, and she showed that little boat, and she stretched that balloon out, and she blew it up. And she said, "You blow it up now." And because she didn't care about germs. And he blew it up as much as she could, and she blew it up some more. And she put that little balloon on that tube, that little wooden tube that goes to the little tube on the end, and the boat had just enough propulsion to go the entire length of the tub. Bump. It was a beautiful, little elegant thing. And Liam looked up at Marguerite and said, "Aunt Marguerite, you're a genius." And Marguerite said, "Yeah, I know. I found that on a crooked road."
Thanks for joining us for a little story from the Appleseed.